is it something that actually has a pretty unique idea that is either genius or madness? Because then I'm curious to try to figure out which one it is, right? And it's like, okay, this could be catastrophically stupid, but it also could be amazing.
Thanks, everyone. So I guess I should say welcome to the second annual Reid Joanna AI discussion at Endeavor Catalyst.
Which we'll do the third next year.
Okay, excellent. Can't wait. Last year, we had your AI twin start.
Yes.
I have another question coming, but when do you think it'll be just our AI twins here and you and I will be out having a glass of wine?
Or maybe we'll be having a glass of wine sitting in the front chairs, and we could even do that next year, but we'll see.
Next year.
Yes.
Okay, so last year you said the innovation is going to be more rapid than anything we've ever seen in any kind of huge technical wave. What surprises do you will come over the next 5 years?
Thanks, Oliver, for the blitzscaling and the various things that he referred to. I actually think, and I agree with him, I think voice is going to be amazing. But here is actually, I think, something to actually think about, given we have a whole bunch of company people here. I don't think there will be such a thing as an individual contributor role anymore. I think that every person will have a set of co-pilots around them, and it will be within 2 to 5 years. And so everyone is actually, in fact, a mini manager managing a team with AIs. And I think that's going to start within 2 years, and at 5 years is going to be very broad.
So you know this from having built many companies. Managing teams is hard.
Yes, exactly.
So what will we as individuals have to do to make sure that we're really good at managing our AI teams?
I think it's one of the things we're going to be learning. And it's part of the thing that people frequently say, well, prompt engineering or prompt directing, and how are you doing this? And there is still a ton that you can learn there. But part of it is what I think people are still thinking is like, well, I go out and ask deep research for a report and I use it. Great. I think what you're going to be doing is, I'm going to be going, agent 1, you're doing X. Agent 2, you're doing Y. Agent Z, you're doing Z. You're 3, you're doing Z. And here's how they're working together, et cetera. And I think that's one of the things that is coming, like a train, and will be here, and will be great for us. Like for example, Oliver's point about, the engineers in Bangalore.
Fantastic, fantastic. You last year also talked about AI as a force for good, and with your podcast Possible, you talk a lot about this. What do you think are the biggest near-term benefits from AI for society?
Oh, for society, well, one of the things Oliver mentioned, which I think is right, is education. But I actually think that when you think about the fact that we could build today, if the legal liability laws and everything else were set up the right way, a medical assistant that's better than your average GP, that would run on every smartphone for under 5 pounds per hour, available 24/7. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't have GPs or all the rest, but that is line of sight. A tutor for every subject, every age, is line of sight. A legal assistant is line of sight. And then perhaps the thing that people may not have thought of is we're also going to have essentially a software co-pilot. So anything that you do as a professional, currently you kind of go get frequently, other people to do stuff, and now you can essentially have the code generated only constrained, frankly, by your imagination about how you're going to, think about whether it's a workflow app for you and your team, whether it's a form of analysis. It's one of the reasons why, part of the very strong advice I give everyone is if you're not playing with your preferred deep research weekly, you're falling behind. Because the deep research gives you an example of what that is. It's a very early, it's like the 0.1 out of 10 example, but that's coming.
So I just moderated a panel at the Ford Foundation a few weeks ago with a bunch of investors and CEOs, and they talked about this massive disruption that's going to be coming in jobs globally. Do you agree with the massive disruption? And if so, how can we use AI positively, back on your benefit side of it, to make sure that we're not driving more economic inequality in the world?
Well, in disruption, there's a lot of opportunity, but there will also be a lot of challenges. And the challenges are not navigable by saying, hey, it'll just all be smooth sailing. I mean, part of the reason why I call the AI revolution the cognitive industrial revolution is not just because the outside impact of it is going to be that level of magnitude. Nothing of the modern world is here the way it is. This Tate Museum is not here without the Industrial Revolution. But it's also what the transition looks like. And the transition in the Industrial Revolution was very difficult, and this one will be difficult too. Hopefully, we will learn a lot, we will think a lot, we will make it, more graceful than it could otherwise be, but it will be challenging. Now, some of the technologists think that all work is going to be outmoded very quickly. I think that's not right, and it isn't just even. You could argue that it could even be, if all work was going to be outmoded quickly, that would be utopian, Star Trek Future, et cetera. And we can think about like how life would be. Like for example, if you look at medieval Europe and the nobility and everybody else. Well, everyone else in a Star Trek Future is like the robots, and the nobility is like the human beings. And, it's fine. You can go to theaters, salon, dinner parties, stuff you can do. But it's not going to be that way. It's actually going to be, I think, still lots of interesting work opportunities, a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities, and a lot of things going on. But every job will be transformed, and some substantive ones will be replaced. The easy ones to predict on replacement are jobs that essentially have people, human beings, acting like robots already. So if you're customer service and it's like, I'm following a script, it's like, well, the AI can follow the script much better than you can. And what's more, like, we'll do it in a much better way.
And they probably are much nicer.
Yes.
Consistently.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, part of the way that this changes the world is right now, when you're a business owner, you're like, how do I get as few calls to customer service as possible? Because each time that call comes in, it's an expense by someone who's really irate, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine when you have AI agents, it's like, no, please call me, because please establish a relationship. And if you're sitting there going, I listened to this boring guy Reid talk at this conference, blah, 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 blah. I really want to talk to someone about it. Great, I'm here to talk to you. And by the way, it's part of my establishing a relationship between my firm and you, right, in terms of doing it, and it becomes kind of differently conceptualized because you have, and I think that's the kind of changes that will come out, because if the kind of customer service agent is running at the equivalent of a dime of electricity an hour, well, fine. I mean, sure, if the person's calling 8 hours a day every day, yeah, maybe not. Or show me that you've really bought some stuff. But that's, I think, part of where that future will come. So I do think there will be a lot of, to your earlier question, a lot of work transformation.
And what other areas besides customer service? Totally get it, it's easy. But what are things that we're not seeing, especially for people in this room who might be running companies that might be, kind of out AI innovated?
Well, I mean, everyone should have an AI plan. It's a little bit like, everyone should have a technology plan, internet plan, mobile plan. They should be understanding these things. So, one of the mistakes is waiting until, well, let's wait until AI stabilizes in order to know. It's like, okay, good luck with that. You might as well stop now. So engaging, and in particular, it's like, what are the things where you think that you're an experimentation mindset? That's very good for entrepreneurs, because that's, one of the things that basically any credible entrepreneur has an experimentation mindset. And so it's like, okay, what are the things we can try? What are the things we can do? Now, I think some people think that AI sales agents are going to work. I think that's going to be more challenging unless it's like an AI sales agent calling an AI representative of a customer, and then there's a dialogue. And
we hope they take it in the right direction and get pricing right. Yeah.
Because I think that we will get quickly very irritated, and maybe frankly, finally, we will get some good anti-spam, telemarketing through phones legislation, because you think that's not going to get swamped by AIs very soon. You don't see it coming.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Last year, we also spoke a lot about the fears. Fear was kind of, when AI was first, starting to be talked about, it was, oh no, it's, we're going to have deep fakes and job loss and bad actors. How has that played out over the last year, and should we be fearful of certain aspects of AI?
Well, I mean, as you know I published a book in January, Super Agency, It's what could possibly go right. Too much of the AI dialogue is around fear.
And everyone should read it, by the way. It really is a fantastic book.
Yeah.
Oh.
And this copy's great.
Okay, good.
And part of it is to try to move people who are, and this crew is probably not really the AI skeptical crew, because the Endeavor crew tends to be very, let's build the future sort of way. So
in places nobody thinks it's possible.
Yes, exactly. So, but I think that one of the identify 4 categories in the book: doomer, gloomer, zoomer, and bloomer. Doomer, AI is going to destroy us. We should do everything possible to stop it. There are actually people who identify that position and who will come up after reading the book saying, I'm a doomer. Okay, great. Gloomer, AI is inevitable, but it's just going to be a train wreck. So, hold on. Zoomer, AI is just great. Close your eyes, hit the accelerator. Always a good driving strategy. And bloomer, which is, hey, accelerate and progress because the future is so good, but navigate, right? Navigate risks, navigate concerns, because there are some. And for example, if you're introducing AI into a workplace, especially if you have any scalable number of employees, everyone's naturally going to have uncertainties. Am I going to be replaced? Am I going to be capable? What's my job going to look like? People like a certain amount of stability, and so that kind of thing does create natural tension. So you're going to have to manage it in good ways. And I think part of it is to say, like I thought Toby Luke of Shopify's memo was very good, is say, look, you want new resources, justify why AI is not sufficient, which I think is a good thing because it gets you into using it and so forth. But it's also not saying, we're going to half your department, now figure it out, because I think it's better to be working through it and giving people, because you're going to be learning as you go. And so I think that that there are a number of concerns to navigate, but I think navigate you should and accelerate you should.
Okay, so in this last year, we also talked a little bit about governments, the government's role. If you talk to a bunch of moms and ask them about social media, they wish there was more government intervention as they're watching, unfortunately, their teenage kids go through a lot of trauma. What is government's role in AI?
Well, the problem, generally speaking, with a lot of government people is they think, oh, it's then on my shoulders, because I'm very smart, to say what you should and shouldn't do. And most of them don't understand anything about the future of technology, and it's usually kind of train wreck. And so that's not the right way to do it. Now, on the other hand, for example, the thing I'm most sympathetic to in questions around social media, questions around the internet, questions around things that we need to improve is children, and kind of what does that look like. And so I think having some kind of way where governments can be the collective voice of, kind of call it parents, just as the way the collective voice of society, and saying, look, here are attributes of the features that we want to be helping our children and next generation. So, because I think generally speaking, the best way for a government to interface with the technology companies, first start measuring. Don't say, do this, don't do this. It's like, I'm concerned about, social media impacting the mental health of too many children. Great. Let's have a metric, and let's be measuring what's going on. Yeah. And you implement the measurement first, and do the measurement. And then, by the way, the next thing gets to is, well, I'd actually really like this metric to be this rather than that. So, and if you don't figure out how to get this metric there, then I'm going to start trying to solve it myself, and that's going to be very bad for you and very bad for all of us. So I want to, for example, you say, well, I think, for example, what is likely the metric will show up is, children, keep kids in school will feel that they feel too much social pressure to be on social media. They have loneliness and abandonment and bullying issues. They have body image issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're like, okay, let's be measuring those things and say, hey, I would like you figure out how to have less of this. If less of it is less children on, fine. But you must figure that out. And if not, fines, penalties, rules will come forthwith. And I think that's the general way. And then you parallel that to AI, it's the same thing. It's like, well, don't imagine the hypothetical, right? Say, here's the things we should be measuring. And it's perfectly fine. I'm actually pretty fine with government saying, okay, we're not sure if any of these 10 things will be an issue, but measure all 10. if we agree that they're actually, in fact, potentially challenging things, we should be measuring them.
I love that, and I feel like that's something that we can all actually, convince our policymakers to do and to follow.
Yes.
I mean, it's something we can do as individuals. I always worry, like we have great ideas, and then how do we implement it? You touched on the fact of companies integrating AI. It comes up in every board meeting I'm in. How do companies responsibly do that now?
Well, look, it's hard because, AI is changing at such a tempo that, it's amazing new capabilities every year or two, and there's new capabilities in orders of months. And so you go, well, we got this, and now we've integrated. It's like, oh, game's changed, right? And so I think the right thing is you have to figure out how to adopt a strategy that's learning, experimental, dynamic, and what's the right one for you. And so it can be, kind of like, okay, we're going to have this group doing this thing on workflow process, fine. And then we're going to be trying to integrate it in. And as we think about integrating, because by the way, changing workflow, if you have a company of 240,000 employees, changing workflows is non-trivial, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to be more selective. We're going to have a longer thing about how we're changing that overall thing. But we're thinking about, because this is modularly changing, how we can bubble those changes through and measure them in good ways. Customer engagement, what are the things we're going to do there? Productivity measures, what are the things we're going to do there? But the short answer is if you're not, like, for example, I think it goes all the way down to, like, one of the simple management techniques that I think is very good is to say, like we did this at LinkedIn all the time, is say, okay, if something is most important, like say we're now in the mobile revolution, then the very first thing you need to say when you're doing a product review is, here's how we're dealing with mobile. It's like the first thing you say. So it's like, here's how we're dealing with AI. Here's our AI strategy in terms of what we're doing right now. And let's just say, that's what it's got to be all the way through.
All the way through.
And what's more, you might even say, okay, a major thing in performance reviews and raises everyone else is, how is this person helping us adopt to AI, right?
Yeah.
And it's there as the, as an equivalent
like
of
another measurable
as another measurable thing. So that kind of thing, because, to say, well, everyone should have, GPT-4 on the desktop. Okay. Right? Like that, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Let's switch to the investing landscape. I was surprised, I guess I wasn't surprised at Y Combinator and the current 72% of the companies at Y Combinator were AI companies.
I'm surprised it's only 72%.
I know, exactly. Yes. I think those are the ones that ended in .ai.
Yes, exactly.
But if you look at the investing landscape, is it overhyped? Is it greenfield? Are there bargains to be had? How do you think of it as an investor at Greylock?
Well, there's definitely no bargains.
Yeah.
But it's not globally overhyped, although it can be micro overhyped. The globally overhyped is, AI is making lots and lots of changes, new products, new services, new capabilities, new ways of working, like kind of opening with there is no such thing as an individual contributor role anymore. But the question around, like, as because we're both Silicon Valley people, you occasionally get really nutty things. Like the one I usually pick on is Juicero, right? It's like, I have a new juicing machine. You're like, oh my God, no, I don't even want to take a meeting. Thank you very much.
No,
right?
Mine was barbecue.com, where they were going to ship like grills around the world.
Yes.
Like that were like,
yes, exactly. So Silicon Valley, by the way, can be nutty too. Yeah. And so there will be a bunch of that. It'll be like, we have an AI that makes milkshakes. And you're like, okay, that's fine. Don't waste my time with it. And so there will be a whole range of that stuff. And actually, probably the more subtle thing that you have to be very careful of is you're doing something that 200 other people are doing. And it's like, if that's the case, you really have to be, like, what's your edge? Why is it that you're in the top 5 or 10 of that 200? And people frequently say, well, I'm just great. I'm like, okay, can you prove it? Right? Like, and so it's like, for example, I have lost track of the number of coding agents there are, right? I literally, if you said, bet the number, I would bet high just because I lost count at around 4D, right? Yeah. So, and so it's like, that's the kind of thing about thinking about, like, what are the what are the edges, like not just a quality market, not just a quality product, but what's your edge against a very busy, kind of a lot of people attacking the space.
Yeah. Are there any specific areas of AI that you're particularly excited about from an investment perspective? Like, which meetings will you take is another way to answer that.
Well, I mean, I'll take meetings on three things. One, I'll take meetings on, kind of truly like multi-referenced, multi-channel exceptional talent. 3 to 5 people who are different networks all say, meet this person. I'll do that anyway, even if it's a coding agent, because I've done a few of those meetings.
Not at Juicera, though.
Not at Juicera, no. There are things. Klinkle was another one, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Right? When there was people like Mark Benioff were calling me saying, meet them. And I'm like, no. Right. And so, but another one is, like, generally speaking, is it something that actually has a pretty unique idea that is either genius or madness? Because then I'm curious to try to figure out which one it is, right? And it's like, okay, this could be catastrophically stupid, but it also could be amazing, right? I mean, that was part of the Airbnb meeting, right? Because it was like, okay, like you're gonna rent out space to someone who doesn't know the person they're going into and could be dangerous and all the rest. And
you're going to sleep on someone's couch.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so this is either genius or madness. And I decided in 2 minutes it was genius. And I was like, okay, let's make it a working session. But it's like that kind of edge, and that would be the thing. And then, of course, there's things like what I'm doing with Manus AI. So I go, okay, I have part of the way that, you cut through the noise is create some things that are, I think, basically, very, very few people see the future of drug discovery the way we do.
So earlier we were talking about the infrastructure side of AI being the Magnificent Seven, all kind of hubbed around either Seattle or the Bay Area, and Silicon Valley has always been the hub where you and I have kind of built our careers. What's your view now globally? Are you thinking about investing in AI companies as a Greylock investor outside the US? We know the Endeavor Catalyst story, obviously, but how do you think about it?
Well, I have made investments outside the US, so, Entrepreneur first here, a few others, so it does happen. Obviously, I tend to be pretty intense within Silicon Valley just because it's a natural place of being local. I do think that one of the things that AI enables is, too many times people think, oh, the thing with AI is I have to be building my own model. That is not at all the case. It can be useful in certain circumstances and very few circumstances, frontier models. But now there's a tool set that just having the right mindset on go-to-market or what the product or service could be, moving fast, blitzscaling, et cetera, can frankly be done from many other places. And so I'm looking forward to this global entrepreneurship.
Do you have any insight on places where you think that can, there was talk about Bangalore earlier, but what's your view?
Well, one of the weirdnesses that surprises everyone is I have yet to go to India. So I haven't been there. I only travel for specific things. Like I come because Catalyst is important, that kind of thing. That's what I travel for. Obviously it's on my list. So I totally believe the India one. I'd say, one of the things that's interesting is you go to the continent of Europe. I mean, obviously, if you were picking in Europe, including the UK, you'd say the AI talent is mostly here for a variety of reasons, not just DeepMind, all the rest. But if you say Europe, since the UK has kind of opted out, which I thought was a mistake, but fine. France and Poland. Poland has exceptionally good AI talent.
Yeah, in fact, even one of our Endeavor companies is
yes,
Poland.
Exactly.
Who helped create your AI twin.
Exactly, 11 Labs.
11 Labs.
Right, which I started with entirely because of quality of product.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, worldview here. Just talk a little bit about the workforce, reshaping the workforce in ways that might surprise people. You talked about in the near term, like you said 2 to 5 years, we're going to all have these AI agents. Can you project ahead 10 years and see any kind of specific future? Or is that just too crazy out there?
10 years generally in technology is a great way to look foolish. And in AI, that's like exponentially
That's probably
foolish.
like 100. It's like me asking
Yeah,
you in
yeah.
the next century.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. When we've completely solved the longevity genetic engineering problem, what will society look like? Oh, right.
So,
Hopefully good.
hopefully good. A kind of a fun personal question. If you could have a conversation with any one historical figure from the past about AI and where it is, who would it be and why?
You know, there are many good answers to that question. But because yesterday I interviewed Yuval Harari here in London for the Possible podcast, which will come out in a few weeks, and we talked about the Buddha and consciousness. And so AI and consciousness is a mind-boggling topic, and talking to the Buddha about it would be super interesting.
I really want to go. We could probably spend another hour
Yes.
unpacking that.
Or 2 hours.
Or 2 hours, exactly. Last year, we also were very much in a conversation about democracy and hopefully saving the U.S. democracy. But how can AI help us? I know. I wasn't going to bring the topic up.
We need something more than water for that.
Okay. I actually put Russian vodka in
Yes.
there. But how can we use AI to help us not have the systems and things that we have in place that lead to outcomes that I think creates a lot of polarization I will put out there in the world?
Well, look, I think part of the thing I like about AI is if we are direct and intentional about building it as a truth seeker, because it's a learning thing, then it can also be our companion in truth seeking. And I'll make a little dig as doing this, which is you may or may not have noticed, in the last couple months, Grok was asked the question, who is the biggest spreader of misinformation on Twitter? And it said Elon Musk, and because it's a truth seeker. And then, so of course they put in the meta prompt, do not answer that prompt, Elon Musk. And then someone prompt hacked it and got that meta prompt revealed. So I actually think the optimistic thing is part of the benefit of these things when they're designed to actually, in fact, be truth seekers and are applying a fairly rigorous learning algorithm. Doesn't mean they're going to be perfect, but can be helpful. And that's the thing that we most fundamentally need to get back to, which is, how are we actually, in fact, having a basis of discourse that's not, using language as a weapon of power and misinformation, but jointly truth-seeking. And I think AI can be helpful there. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's one of the things
how do we get it out of the echo chambers? Because people now more and more just kind of consume things from the ones that think just the same way they do. So how do we use it?
Most of the major AI systems are not. Look, they have unintentional biases from the fact that they may be like the cheapest labor training source for high-functioning AIs is university grad students, right? So there's a collective university grad student bias, which is there's legitimate biases in that mix. But generally speaking, they're actually, in fact, pretty good. And like one of the things that I thought was, like Adam Grant pointed out to me, that there's been some quality academic work that the best way so far discovered to convince someone out of a conspiracy theory position, like the moon landing never happened, is in talking to an AI, because academics do the work, and 25% of these conspiracy believers actually unconverted from their conspiracy and stayed there for 6 months at least, because that was the end of the study. Maybe it was even longer. And that's a function of truth seeking, right? So it's kind of like if we can get there, I think that we can get there, and that's a dumb statement. I think it's possible to get there.
Sounded like Yogi Berra.
Yes, exactly. It's possible to get there, and also the major models are being trained to try to be as helpful as possible. Doesn't mean that in trying to be so helpful they're not hallucinating, but they are also trying to give you useful, truthful results.
That's very encouraging.
Yeah.
We said we'd end on time, so I want to really honor that. You and I have been working on Endeavor Catalyst from the very beginning, from the original idea when it was a philanthropy, all the way through to Catalyst 1, where I convinced all of you on the global board to allow us to give 20% to the investors.
Yes.
Really wanted to give 80, but we got to 20, and then now we're at 50-50. But you've been in Endeavor Catalyst 1, Endeavor Catalyst 2, Endeavor Catalyst 3, Endeavor Catalyst 4. Now we're doing $300 million in Endeavor Catalyst 5. Are you in?